we've been in this series called ETHOS, Sacred Values for a Struggling World. And really, each week we've been just exploring a new value that together builds a value set that we believe can really bring healing and change into not only our communities, but in our lives and in our world. And so when I knew that you were coming, and just having been able in these last 3 years to participate in some of the amazing things that TIHAN's doing, the word that really just immediately sprung up for me is compassion. And I know that that's a word that resonated with you as well. So I just would love, if just to start off today, if you would mind just sharing a bit about what does compassion mean to you as a value that really has power to change us as human beings, to impact our world.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you all. Let me share 3 examples of compassion in my life. I grew up as a gay man and never really thought that was okay, and yet on some level I knew it was. But as a gay man growing up in the 70s, and it was early 1980s, I was terrified about this new disease before it even had a name, but I knew that it could impact me, and didn't know anything about it, but I was really terrified. My best friend and mentor as I was in college was the first person, and he came to me one day, and we were sitting like this. Actually, we were sitting on the floor, and he told me he had this new disease that we didn't know what it was, and I remember being terrified for him and what that might mean to him. And I remember as he's crying and I'm crying, and I reach over, and he had this soda that he was drinking from, and I reached over consciously and grabbed his cup and took a drink out of it, thinking, oh my goodness, I could be catching this disease, which of course I couldn't, but I didn't know that. But that wasn't the point. The point was I wanted to show him that whatever it was not going to keep me from loving him and showing that compassion. The next example of compassion that is close to my heart is I'm sitting in a church like this. This is probably 8 years later. I'm sitting in a church like this one Sunday morning. I was new to the congregation. Didn't really know people. But a guy stands up during the service, there's a sharing portion, and he says, my name is Tim, and I have AIDS, and I need some help and support because I don't have anybody. And I'm looking around at these people and say, they seem like nice folks, but how are they going to respond? So I went over to talk to him after the service, to talk to Tim and see if there was something I could do. But there was a line of people to talk to Tim. There were doctors and nurses in the congregation that wanted to make sure he was getting medical care. There were social workers that wanted to make sure Tim was connected to services. There were grandmothers who went up to him and said, I don't know anything about AIDS, but I can bake you a casserole so you're not hungry. And there were college kids that said, if you just want to hang out and talk to somebody, I'm there for you. I said, that's the kind of compassion that I want a faith community to have. And that's the kind of place that I could be part of. And then the third and more recent example was, if y'all remember November of last year, it was right after the election. And our clients, or care partners as we call them, at TIHAN, it's primarily LGBTQ folks, poor folks, people really on the margins, and people were feeling scared about what was going to happen after the results of that election. And Denise, your own Denise here, said, I want to do something. And so she said, I'm going to handwrite letters to, I think there were like 300 or so at that time. She says, I want to handwrite notes to each of your clients, your care partners, to tell them that somebody who doesn't even know them all, I know some of them, but I don't know most of them, that someone is thinking of them. And it just brought me to tears. So those 3 examples for me of compassion through my life and my work.
And part of compassion is just growing in awareness, right? Like there's that opening of the heart as each of those stories share, and being aware of other people's experiences and opening ourselves to experiences beyond our own. And so part of the awareness around specifically HIV/AIDS is, I think there is, as we've talked about, there's a lack of understanding just in general, because this is something that has really evolved and changed over the past 50 years. And in many ways, public understanding hasn't evolved in the same way. And I think for us to really be able to exercise compassion in our current context is also to understand, like, where are things at? Could you explain to us as a community of people who maybe have varying degrees of experience and knowledge between, that first story that you described, that very beginning where there wasn't a lot of information and wasn't a lot of understanding, and now where we are? Just describe a little bit of that journey and how that impacts the work you do today.
So HIV, like anything, is an opportunity for us to figure out who we are and how we relate to that, and how we as humanity, we as individuals, can respond and find ways to connect with people and be part of the solution. So right now, there's been great advancements, but right now there are 40 million people around the world living with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. And people, sometimes when I tell them what I do for a living, they say, oh, HIV/AIDS, is that still a thing? It's still a thing. 40 million people today around the world are living with HIV. We've had 42 million people die as a result of the virus. There will this year be another million people who newly contract HIV, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. Right here in the United States, there are 1.2 million people who have HIV, the virus that can cause AIDS. So yes, it's the numbers are not going down. They're going up, but they're going up in part because there are new medications that can keep people alive and living well. So people aren't dying, at least in this country, like they used to, from HIV, but the numbers keep going up. So our role at TIHAN is to make sure people know that these medications exist. That people sometimes hear about HIV, and if they realize that sometimes they have outdated thinking about what HIV is. It used to be a death sentence. My friend Jerry, he didn't have any medications. There were no options, and he died pretty soon after he was diagnosed. That's changed now. So the good news, the message that we want to convey is that there are medications that can treat HIV. It's called antiretroviral therapies, one of the greatest achievements of modern medicine, but still too many people don't know about it. But if you take these medications, if you contract HIV and you take these medications, it can reduce the amount of virus in your body. It's still there, it doesn't go away, we don't have a cure, but it can reduce the amount of virus in your body to what's called undetectable. It's a very, very low suppressed level. And that's our goal, is to get people who test positive on antiretroviral, get their medication to get their virus suppressed, and that way it's not destroying their immune system. And they're gonna stay healthy and live well. The other thing that these medications do, which is miraculous, is that reduced level of HIV in your body, it prevents you from passing HIV onto your partner. So in addition to you staying healthy, it's making you unable to pass your HIV on, which is as close to a cure as we can get. So that's why people can live longer with these medications, is that we can keep people healthy and prevent them from passing HIV on. The scary part of this is that 1 million people who will newly contract HIV around the world this year, a lot of people don't know that they have HIV. Even in the United States here, with all of the progress we've made and all of the advancements, 1 of every 7 of the 1.2 million people, 1 of every 7 people in the United States that has HIV don't know they have HIV. So they're not taking these antiretroviral medications. They don't know. And why don't they know they have HIV? Stigma, right? They don't know they have HIV because either they're afraid to find out, or they think that only impacts those people. And everybody has their own idea who those people are. But the reality is HIV can impact anyone. If you've ever had sex, hopefully most of us have at a certain age, and if you've ever had any kind of exposure to blood or a product that has blood, you could be exposed to HIV. So it's important for people to get tested because now there are treatments that can keep you healthy and keep your loved one, your partner, your family healthy. So that's kind of what's going on with HIV. There are also amazing new developments for people that are at high risk for HIV, prevention options that we didn't used to have when I was growing up. There are medications, if you're at high risk for HIV, and who's at high risk for HIV? People who have multiple partners, people whose partner is HIV positive, women, or well, I shouldn't say that, excuse me, anyone who's in a domestic violence relationship and their partner may not allow them to take protection, who may be controlling them. So anyone that's at high risk for HIV can take these medications in advance, and you will not contract HIV even if you're exposed. That's amazing that we have that. So there are great developments, amazing research and science, and pharmaceutical developments that are really changed the world of HIV. But you all probably know this. We are in a time where things are kind of going backwards. They're cutting funds for research. They're cutting funds for prevention. They're cutting funds for services. So in some ways, we're kind of going backwards. Just because we're not talking about HIV, just because we're cutting prevention programs and services, it just means there's going to be more cases of HIV. Just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean it's going away. So it's creating a bigger problem that's going to happen in the future. But the take-home message is great developments, and we're getting closer if we can just continue on in this track.
And it sounds like with these amazing developments, so much of the work that you do is really just bringing that awareness, helping people to understand what options they have, which can lead to a full, meaningful life that without those very same options wouldn't have been a possibility. And you talk about also just the awareness of people even finding out that they've contracted it and the barrier to that being stigma. And, you know, I was reflecting about stigma because, as you mentioned, it is this ability for us to say those people over there who have that problem. And it seems that so much of what we're facing in our culture, and you talk about going backwards, so much of the challenges that we're facing revolve around this capacity in us to really place stigma on other people. And in many ways, I find stigma to almost be an excuse or a way for us to take the responsibility off of ourselves to take care of our own fellow human beings. Because if we say, oh, it's those people over there, then I don't have to recognize that I have a responsibility to my brothers and sisters, right? I just say, oh, you know, they're dealing with that, you know. And so, you know, if you would just speak a little bit to that insidious power of stigma, and perhaps even just beyond HIV/AIDS, you know, but even into just the LGBTQIA plus community and marginalized communities, anyone that we other, right? How do we rise above this? Because stigma seems to be deeply diseased and harming our society right now. So.
That's a tough. It's a complex set of issues around stigma, whether it's HIV stigma or stigma around so many other things. I think sometimes, and it's especially true more recently, it seems, that there's a lack of empathy, that we've come to a place where we're focused on our own selves and our own lives and our own well-being and our own success, that we're not thinking about other people. I mean, I may not know this person that is standing on the street corner asking for money. I may not know them. I don't know their circumstances, but I can see that that's not an easy life. And somehow their life circumstances that I don't understand got them here. And there are systemic issues that caused that I, whether I like it or not, am a part of. And so if I just turn that off and think about, roll up my window and, think about my Starbucks that I'm drinking and, where I'm going and what I'm doing and my own challenges, I think there's just this lack of empathy, this lack of connection. And without empathy, it's hard to have compassion. And the compassion part is not just the I feel for you, but it's the I want to do something. Those two hands that you talked about, there's something that I can do. And I don't know how so many of us in this world today have gotten away from that. But it's sad and it's scary. And the stigma is not just around HIV, and it's not just around being gay, and it's not just around, just think in your own lives, I can say I used to have stigma around HIV, that I didn't understand it and maybe was judgmental of it, that I thought it was those people and people who are more promiscuous or whatever you fill in the blank with, who was the people that were most at risk. But the same is true of so many issues where there's stigma. I think of trans kids today that are facing the brunt of discrimination and not even now able to access medical care that's affirming to them. I don't have to be trans or have a trans kid to know how much that can hurt. I don't have to be an immigrant who brought my child across the border without permission to get a better life, to understand that that there's judgment that this person and this family will receive, and that regardless of their circumstances, they're a human just like me trying to do something. But I know the stigma is growing, and we as a society are making that worse. We're scapegoating people. That some people are trying to use those stigmas and those fears that we have about competition and about they're taking our resources or they're taking our tax money or whatever it is. But we've gone to a place, some of us have gone to a place of not feeling any empathy and trying to say they're taking away from me and my well-being instead of this is a human, that could be me. I happen to be born a white cisgender man on this side of this little artificial border. But if I had happened to be born on the other side, I'd be trying to do that for my kid if I could, And if I were born a trans kid and all of that confusion of who I am and what I should be doing and how I relate to the world, I would be wanting to get those medications and affirm who I am. So whether it's stigma around whatever, my husband who's over here, I hope you get a chance to meet him. His name is Jess. Jess grew up in foster care and dealt with the stigma of that. Jess became involved in drugs as a young man, and stigma around that. Started using drugs as a result. I had this stigma around anybody who used drugs. I would never, want to affiliate with anybody who was using meth, that was terrible. And, he served time in prison for that. And I'm like, I would never, ever want to be around somebody that, was a felon. Here I am married to him, So, the point is, every one of us, especially me, has these thoughts in our head of, you mentioned othering people, and these judgments that we have wherever we get them that separate us from people and make us judge people. But then when we can really explore in our own lives where that thinking comes from and figure out how to help us move beyond that and then see it as a person and find in whoever it is that spark of God, that spark of humanity, that I can see that this person in some ways is the same as me, and then how can I try to put them down, judge them, feel any better than them if I'm really being honest with myself?
it feels like empathy is something that we just really need to protect and safeguard, because in many ways it seems like something as clear and obvious as empathy even feels kind of under attack right now. And really this talk could have just as much been empathy as it is compassion, and they go so hand in hand. And it feels like, in many ways, as what you're talking about, radical empathy is about being really able to transcend your own experiences, your own situation, to understand that there is a deep kinship, connection, and family with all human beings and all non-human beings as well. And this sense of deep connection to understand that, hey, I am you. Maybe I've had a different set of experiences, but we are the same. And then when you think about the different set of experiences that lead to different things, you describe this idea of facing stigma and then perhaps going to something like drugs to really deal with that, and then that just creating a whole other host of issues. Really what we're touching on is this idea of intersectionality, which is really that in many ways different marginalization, different systems can really work against people and affect people in multiple ways at the same time. And so I imagine that a lot of the community of those who are coming to seek support through TIHAN are people who face not just, difficulties in one area of their life, but that they are themselves an intersection of many different cultures and identities. And if many of those identities are under attack, then they're going to be experiencing something really just unbelievably overwhelming. And so maybe just speak a little bit to the how intersectionality sort of impacts your work.
Yeah, so the people we serve, in addition to having HIV, they're mostly older. Most of our folks are over the age of 50, so they're starting to experience some issues around age and ageism. They also are long-term survivors of HIV, so they have maybe lost a partner. Many folks have lost their support system. Maybe their family rejected them. Maybe their circle of friends all died in the 1980s and 1990s. So most of our folks tend to be living alone. Most of our folks are part of the LGBT community. Although about a fourth of them are women who are not part of that community. We have a number of heterosexual men also. Our folks are primarily poor, living under the federal poverty level, people with histories of substance abuse and depression, mental illness. So they're dealing not just with HIV, but a whole host of things. And I hope that those of you that will be participating in serving our lunch for our care partners in August, when it's Aldea's turn to serve, they're dealing with a whole bunch of issues that are complex. It's just like if you have an African American man and an African American woman, they're going to see racism in very different ways, right? And if you have an African-American woman and a white woman, they may also see sexism in different ways. And then you add on other intersecting components, like being poor, or like being queer, or like having HIV, or having a substance use issue. There's a whole set of complex things, and trying to label somebody or stereotype one group as all being the same when we all have all of these intersecting identities, it gets more complicated. But it comes back to somebody's here, they're hungry, they've taken 2 buses to get here for this lunch that you all are serving. They have HIV, maybe the first time they're afraid that they're going to see somebody that knows them or somebody who knows their family, that somebody's going to tell everybody else that they have HIV. They can't afford a whole lot. This is the only time of the month they get to go out and have a meal. And here you are, as this beautiful, willing servant who says, I'm here to help make things a little bit better today. I'm bringing my 2 hands, I'm bringing my heart, and I'm going to serve this meal to you. You may not understand all of the complexities of what they're going through. I sure don't. But I can see this is a human, and my role is to show them as much love as I can and treat them with the level of dignity that I would want to be treated with, that I would want my loved ones to be treated with. And it's not going to save the world. It's not going to address all of the systemic issues, but it's going to make that person's life a little bit better for right now. And I have a responsibility not just to give them that meal and that care package, but to look at my own role in those systemic issues that have caused HIV to disproportionately impact people of color, queer people, people who are poor, all of those issues. I've got to look at that in myself, my role, and do something about how society made that possible, that this is who is impacted by HIV. It's just a virus. It doesn't know or care who you are. But here in the United States especially, it's impacting older adults and people on the margins. You know, around the world, that may be a little bit different. It's a little bit primarily women. A little bit around the world in sub-Saharan Africa, it's women and kids. So our role, whatever we choose to do, whether it's around HIV or anything, is to see the humanity and try to do something.
And understanding compassion through this lens that we cannot conceive of and fully understand the complexities of someone else's experience. And it's something that I think is a barrier for a lot of us as we try to rush in and use our thinking minds to kind of try to discern and figure out what's going on with someone else. But what if we could just draw a circle around this beautiful human being in front of us and recognize they are complex, they are mysterious, they hold the divine, and instead of trying to explain it all, create a space to allow them to be whoever they are, whatever they've experienced, no blame, no judgment. And again, part of what you describe is this way that systemic issues affect so many different marginalized communities. And I think one of the ways really that you're encouraging us all to take responsibility is just to be reflective and thoughtful about how we are, without even realizing it, participating in systemic dynamics that go back, generations. And so what is something that maybe we can all do, right? We're all in our different contexts. We all have different spheres of influence. I don't know that every single person here is going to sign up for Paz Cafe.
We don't have room for that.
We don't have room for
I'm sorry.
But what could everyone do just to be reflective about their own participation and just just some simple ways that we can kind of move forward and try to, even tomorrow, do things 1% better?
I would say for me, it's key to break out of our own little bubbles that we're in. I mean, if you don't know any LGBTQ people, if you don't know any trans families that have trans kids, if you don't know anyone who's an immigrant, whether they were here with or without documentation, if you don't know a refugee, step outside of your circle and realize the amazing, beautiful, challenging, complex diversity of this creation, and learn a little bit about how other people see the world. And I think that will somehow change your view, your perspective, and make them not them, but make them us. And I think that's what we need more of, instead of everyone staying in their bubble and focusing on their own livelihood or their own well-being or their own protection, is extending ourselves. I mean, there's great resources, there are books, there are films, there's study sessions, there's podcasts. I'm sure you all have done a lot of that. But it's time, I think, for all of us with what's going on right now, is to just try to extend ourselves a little bit more to people that aren't like us. I've learned so much. I've learned that a black woman living with HIV is going to feel like an outsider when she's around the majority of people with HIV who are gay white men. And how do I make an environment that's safe for her when I didn't understand that at first? That just because you have HIV doesn't mean suddenly you understand gay people and you're comfortable with it, much less being around white people that are trying to provide services to you when you're not really happy about the situation that you're in. So I've learned so much by just extending myself and trying to meet people and understand and be sensitive to them. And I think that the world could use a lot more of that. And I know I sure can.
So obviously we've dove into some heavier topics, which I think we need to do in order to expand the heart space that we have available to us for that compassion. We need to be willing to enter in and to engage in difficult, heavier conversations, things that maybe we haven't thought about and really reflect. But at the same time, in my interactions with TIHAN, I've just also experienced such a joy. There's so much of just a beauty, a lightness. There's so much, I know there's so much gratitude. And I just feel like it's just a beacon of hope in this region. And so just, again, because we've really dove into these topics, but speak to the joy that you experience and the love that is shared in the community.
And Denise can talk to that, and Tibor can talk to that. One of our board members, Jim, is here. His wife, Joni, my husband, Jess. They can also share those stories. People hear about HIV and they think it's all going to be about death and depression, and it can be, but not like it used to be. But that does happen. We do have people die, but the vast majority of our work is about helping people live. And it's about helping people break out of the shame and secrecy that they might have around their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their HIV status, but helping them to live and break through all of that shame that so many people have. And that's joyous to watch people do that. It's joyous to see people becoming themselves and people finding a sense of community. HIV can be so isolating, but when people say, I'm not the only one. I never met anybody like myself. But now I go to this lunch program, and there's a whole room full of people that are living with HIV that don't look like what I thought they were going to. And they're not letting HIV limit them or define them, but that they are living their best life, and they are still seeking help for the challenge that they're facing, but they're doing it together. And so our work is full of life. It's full of joy. It's full of celebration. People are not coming to the lunch, and some people may, but not talking about their challenges. They're talking about, isn't it good to be together? And I'm here today with my community and feeling a part of instead of apart from. And these people that I don't even know are making this amazing lunch for me, and they are serving it to me and treating me special. It's a great feeling. It reminds me of one of our care partners, a woman living with HIV, tells this story that she was having a rough day. This is a woman who's had a rough life. She, had been abused. She was a heroin addict. She was living on the streets. She got cleaned up, got tested for HIV. She's doing much better. But she was having a rough day one day, not too long ago. And someone from TIHAN just called her to check on her out of the blue. And she started crying. She said, it was so moving to me that somebody that I don't even know thought to check in on little old me, she says. They called little old me to check to see how I was doing. And that's what got her back on the path of feeling that she is important and that there are folks that care about her, and there are organizations and systems that are trying to make things a little bit better.
And, in a room this size, many of us are participating in different things. We have our different spheres of influence and our context. And so you may already be, very involved in a different cause. But my hope and prayer is that today, as we walk away from this conversation, that you would be able to, whatever your context is, apply Scott's wisdom and his experience in this work, that to remember that it is those little things sometimes, those little acts of compassion, those acts of transcending ourselves, those acts of just reflecting on how we can affect someone else's life, even if they are in a very different context. And so I'm just really grateful that you would share so many wonderful nuggets and tidbits of just incredible depth. And would you just, give a round of applause for Scott for being here? Now, I would love, obviously we have our service day coming up, but also just in general, if people are interested in learning more, there's a table out in the lobby that you and your posse will be there. But also we have the website up, and is there any other way that you would like to share that people can get involved?
If people are interested in volunteering more than once a year, or if you can't do that one time at the lunch, you can go to our website. We have lots of volunteer opportunities. We're a nonprofit, and just like every other nonprofit, whether it's answering the phones or doing the data entry or making the copies or doing the filing or helping with fundraising, we've got lots of opportunities. And I always say, HIV is not the most important issue for everybody, but it is for some folks. But whatever it is, as you said, whatever it is, the passion that you feel, the difference you want to make in the world, there's so much need and there's so many ways to make a small difference, but that small difference is making a difference, a big difference to people in their lives. So whether it's through TIHAN or through so many other amazing organizations, I know the folks at Aldea, you're doing what you can, and I know that you will continue to do everything that you all are able to, whether it's through TIHAN or somewhere else, and we're just grateful. But we do have brochures. We've got, if you want to be on our mailing list, if you have questions either about HIV or about anything else, come talk to us. And I don't have any special wisdom or knowledge. I just have a lot of experiences and have learned from a lot of people and have had my heart opened, and hopefully it will continue. I know I've got much more growing still to do, as we all do, but it's good to do it in community, and you're very lucky to have this community here to support each other as we go through this. So thank you.
Thank you.